Let me tell you a little bit about a school we call MAC. McClymonds High School was founded in 1915 by a group of 60 students in a small building previously occupied by Oakland Technical High School. Since then, MAC has continued to promote racial justice through education, sports, and the arts. This school is, and always has been, one of the leading voices in Oakland's Black community.
That doesn't mean we haven't had challenges. Starting a school is one thing, but sustaining a community so that it can continue to thrive is another.
In Oakland's tradition, instead of being discouraged, we organized. We brought together student and community leaders to engage in local politics. Out of this movement, Black Youth United was born, in partnership with the Oakland branch of the NAACP.
Black Youth United quickly evolved into a semester-long initiative that allows students like myself an opportunity to work with local politicians who make decisions that impact our schools. Leading up to last year's school board and city council elections, we organized town hall discussions and created open dialogue between us, the future of Oakland, and the candidates.
Each one of us is driven by the belief that all of us deserve an equal opportunity and that we can become patrons of change wherever we are. As we go off to college this fall, as student activists, we'll never forget where we developed our passion for justice and equality, and where we acquired the tools needed to put this passion into action. It all started right here, at a school we call MAC.
Thank you so much to the students of the school that they call MAC, McClymonds High School. Way to set the tone for our day here, guys. Thank you so much. Welcome everyone to A Voice in the Movement presented by Chase. This is this free virtual event is actually a part of the Warriors' larger Black History Month celebration. I'm Ros Gold-Onwude, and I'm personally so happy and excited to be here with my Warriors family and to be here and join you all in celebrating and empowering Black culture and Black communities. Today, we're going to further examine all the ways that we can use our voice to demand equality, to demand equity, and to affect change. First of all, on behalf of the Warriors and Chase, I want to make sure to thank all of you for pulling up, being here today, and joining us for this event. And I know in the audience today, we have the Kingmakers of Oakland. Wanted to welcome you. We also want to welcome Chase California Bold Group. Thank you guys for being here. And I personally also want to make sure that we thank and give a special shout out to the Warriors Black Alliance Network for all of your efforts in basically putting this whole event together and gathering us here today to build and to celebrate. Today, we have a very accomplished and esteemed group of panelists here. I'm very excited to spend time with them here virtually since I can't see them all in person like I normally do. First and foremost, from your very own Golden State Warriors, we have Kent Bazemore with us. What's up, Baze?
What's going on? Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm so glad you could make it. We're very excited to have you here.
It's good to see you again. It's been a long time.
I remember you from Santa Cruz Warriors.
Santa Cruz. Yep, Santa Cruz. There we go. All day.
Right. We go back. Another person here who is someone I look up to so much. And Kent, you leaving us? You can stay.
Oh, all right, I'll stay. All right.
Another person I'd like to bring to the stage, I admire so much, an esteemed journalist for The Atlantic and host of Jemele Hill is Unbothered and co-host of Stick to Sports on Vice, Jemele Hill. What's up, Jemele?
Hey, what's going on, Roz? How are you?
I'm great. Great to see you.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Good to have LA represented as well, a little bit.
LA is in the building. Yeah, both of us are actually coming to you live from LA. And I see, you know what, Byna, you're ready to go, so I'm going to get to you. Our next guest is Byna Elliott on the panel. She is J.P. Morgan Chase, Head of Advancing Black Pathways. Hi, Byna, how are you?
Good seeing you. Thanks a lot for having me.
Absolutely. We're excited to get your insight and perspective on the conversation today.
Absolutely.
I feel like maybe we had last but not least, bring the Oakland native himself to the stage. a mentor, a friend, one of the greats in the business, senior NBA writer for ESPN's The Undefeated, Marc Spears. Hi, Marc. How are you?
Ros, how you doing?
I'm good. Good to see you repping the Bay.
Yeah. You know, somebody had to. Somebody, but you always honorary Bay member.
Always.
You got your rings and everything. You know, they still love you up here.
Oh, I have so much love for the Bay. Absolutely. So guys, we've got a full conversation to get through here. We want to cover kind of a lot as far as the platform, our voice, celebration, hope, but also a lot of times, it does start from a place of pain and discovery. And, 2020 came at us hard. It shook up the entire world, obviously with the pandemic, globally disrupting life. And then at the same time, while this is still happening, but where it really took to a head, within the US, we were ravaged by racial and social unrest, police brutality. It felt like almost, every day our spirits were being tested and attacked in many ways. And for some people, this felt like a long time coming, but there are many perspectives in it. There are some people who felt that it caught them off guard, or that and some people found themselves ill-equipped to healthily navigate everything that was going on. So to kind of step into this, what did you guys find worked for you while trying to navigate 2020 and stepping into this new year, 2021, at the early portions of it? I'll start with you, Jemele.
I gotta be honest, I don't think I did a good job of navigating it. It was a lot for people to deal with. The unfair part about being a Black journalist, and I know Marc and you, Ros, you both can attest to this, is that while we're processing everything that's happening just as a Black person, we also are tasked with having to put it into context for other people and to explain the long-standing issues and traumas that are happening in our community. So we ourselves don't even get time to grieve or to deal or to really sit with it and wonder about its larger meaning, because we're kind of in the moment of it. And so I found myself at moments where I could maybe looking away a little bit more than I might have normally done. And I did that really to protect my own peace. I still haven't watched the George Floyd video, and that has been on purpose. And as we have, social media has been good and bad in that regard, because of course now it is being brought to the forefront in a different way, and we're having a different type of conversation about police brutality, police violence, state-sanctioned violence against Black people. But at the same time, I do worry about these constant images of us being brutalized and beaten and shot and all of these other things, just what kind of long-term and short-term psychological effect that will have. And so I kind of made a decision, some years ago. I'm trying to think, I think it was Sandra Bland. That was the last video that I watched, because I just couldn't keep reliving this. Most of us, we've been dealing with this issue our whole lives. We don't need to be educated about it. We've known it was there. So we're not the audience in many respects for that. Even though I'm happy that it often sparks a conversation, legislation, all these other things that get put into motion. So I think for me, the best way that I could navigate it is to sometimes shrink from it a little bit. And that may not sound exceptionally courageous, but I think I had to do it in order to be able to put everything into context when I did panels like this, or when I was on CNN or on MSNBC, because if I lived in it constantly, I just worried about what that might do to me, not just in the moment, but long term.
Right, Jemele, and I remember feeling like that too. There was a period where there was a week there where almost every day there was a new name we were seeing pop up. I was getting to the point where I too didn't want to see a hashtag on Twitter. I didn't even want to click it because I already knew. And Kent, I'm gonna come to you and bounce this off of you with that. Sometimes we can get discouraged by the system, perhaps feeling like we lost faith in it. And then on the other side, all of you guys have huge platforms. Kent, you're an NBA player. All of you guys, work for huge companies or are journalists. Some people might feel they don't have a big enough platform, a big enough following to speak up or even have a voice. what would you say to those people?
You know, for me, it just kind of depends on where you are in life. So when all this stuff was happening, I'll rewind. April 2019, I had my first child, and I lost my mother-in-law a couple weeks later. I get traded in August of 2019. Then I get traded again in January of 2020. You know, then 5 days later, Kobe Bryant passes. I mean, I'm an NBA player, been playing ball all my life. You know, you lose a staple there. Then COVID happens, and then, you know, the George Floyd situation happens. You know, I think that's in May. Then I go down to the bubble. So, like, my head is spinning, you know, out of control. And, you know, it's hard to kind of put into place, you know, what's actually happening. And thankfully, you know, being in NBA, we had, you know, and knowing people in WNBA, we had so many people kind of step up and take charge. You see Renee Montgomery, Natasha Cloud, people like that sitting out, you know, to do things with social injustice. And that in turn, you know, helped me understand how you know, how serious this stuff is. So, you know, big props to all, you know, my fellow colleagues that led the peaceful marches, you know, in their respective cities, and, you know, really kind of showing me, you know, what I had been missing, you know, because you get caught up in your own storm sometime and you just kind of isolate. And even in isolation, whether it be in your own life or, you know, some of my brothers that, you know, are behind bars, you know, you just kind of missing out on what's going on. So, you know, the dust is starting to settle, and I'm, you know, really starting to figure out where I fit in with all of this.
Absolutely. I definitely feel like the bubble for both the NBA and the WNBA, we saw players really activate their platform and their voice. What did you learn, Kent, about your voice in this whole situation, and how you wanted to step up?
Yeah, we're as NBA is very strong. You know, we're strong. We have a union. You know, it's led by Michelle Roberts, but even deeper than that, you know, you got a lot of guys that come from, you know, some of the same backgrounds that these victims are from. So, you know, they feel that on a totally different level. You know, and then to have, you know, our teammates of a different race kind of get behind us, it really, you know, kind of elevated everything, because now we got people other than, you know, blacks that look like us seeing, you know, someone that looked like them stand up for a great cause. And I think it just kind of unified, you know, everyone, and it caught fire. I mean, it's to be in front of it wearing the Black Lives Matter, you know, shirts out the warm-ups for the first time. And, you know, you didn't really understand the multitude of it until you know, you threw it up, you know, and the world saw it. And, you know, it just kind of took off. And, you know, big props to, you know, the NBA and the PA for allowing us to use, you know, being only sports on TV at that time, you know, one of the few sports on TV at that time, using that platform to, you know, get this information across the world.
Yeah, facts. I mean, and it wasn't just like, you know, superficial, which some people might have thought at first, okay, are the guys just going to be putting names on their jerseys or on their back, right? Or BLM on the court. But it was real. Like, you know, the players came together and worked with the NBPA and team governors, team owners to mobilize practice facilities, arenas, to make them polling and voting stations. So real change happened to help against voter suppression. $300 million, I know, was dedicated through an NBA fund through team governors over the course of 10 years. That money will be given out to help affect change in minority communities and decrease economic disparities in those communities. So, like, I can really point to real change. I'll also shout out the ladies, the WNBA.
Oh yeah, the W for sure.
They needed their flowers. You know, they were very influential, especially with, you know, bringing attention and awareness around the election race, the senator election race in Georgia as well. So their influence was certainly felt. You know, I want to take this one to Marc, Byna, get you guys in the conversation here. As you guys have grown your careers and platforms, Marc, and I know this especially following how you choose to tell stories, you never lose sight of where you're from. And we already know you're from Oakland. How do you guys express and celebrate your identity as a Black person, as a professional?
I'll let the lady go first.
Well, thanks, Mark, for letting me go first. So I'm from Detroit, very similar circumstances as Oakland in terms of the diversity of our community and how we have to use our voice. So it's so important that when you celebrate it, I'm reminded of where I come from, and being unapologetic about what I bring to the table is really important for me. And you had that moment in May where you had to decide when you open up those corporate doors on Monday, how are you going to show up? And what I decided to do was really lean in and have the discussions that needed to be had around, I know you see me in this corporate setting and you think I'm different, but I'm not different than anybody else that you see. And that George Floyd could have been my husband, could have been my son, could have been my nephew. And in fact, that is my worry every day, that there's not a difference between Black people in my neighborhood or Black people in the hood. I am them. And that I have to be the voice in this room unapologetically. And that I want to have the right conversations and go past the platitudes to talking about real solutions for our community that has been hurting for hundreds of years. And how do we really lean in to make this be different? Because as Jemele said, we've all been here before. This isn't the first time we've had these moments, but this time has to be different.
Yeah, for me, working at the Undefeated with ESPN has been the best job I ever had. You know, I write about race in sports, and it's not always easy. And Jemele, don't laugh when I say this. I'd be lying if I said everybody at my company was welcoming of us. You know, to write about race, to write about culture, to write about Black pain, racism, just Black triumph too. You know, that there were people that I didn't think they wanted to see that. They didn't want to read that. They didn't want to push that to the forefront. And then George Floyd happened. And sadly, it was that and the previous person that was president that I think that showed that, you know what, that website is valuable. We need that. And then not just from Black people, but from people of all races. Like suddenly now you see the New York Times have a race writer and sports writer, and the Washington Post has one. And I think the LA Times has one. And then, you know, like sports, now it's important because of George Floyd and because of the guy that just left office. And I'm glad to have been a part of something important. And there have been times where I've written stuff. I get bullets all the time. Oh, you're always writing about race. You always got to bring it up. Yeah, because it's important. And we ain't figured this out yet, as we can see by society. And who knows if we ever will. And I'm going to keep writing about it. Just sadly, I love to have the day where it don't matter no more. And they try to shut us down because, not because they don't want us, but because of what we write, but because, you know, race doesn't matter anymore. But sadly, I don't think that's going to be the case in my lifetime. I think the Undefeated will be needed, and I'm proud to be there.
How can we ensure that this attention, this wave of attention to race in America is not just a moment in time or an influx of press and money by brands and stuff, and that it's something that actually is remedied and invested into, so that, Mark, perhaps, you know, you can see it, if not that it's ended, but that there's real change and growth for our country?
Well, what I'll say about that, I've had a lot of my white friends who called after George Floyd to see how I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, how are you doing? Like, this is not new. We could go back 700 years 300 years. And this isn't new for us. This has been happening forever. And so I said, look, that same fire you got right now,
Mm-hmm.
don't make it a fad. Make it a lifetime. I want you to feel like that your whole lifetime. And because I told my sister, who eloquently said this, I'm like, why all of a sudden they care? Like, he's like, let's just be glad that they care now.
Right.
And so that's something that I want people to never give up that fire that they feel, regardless to what their race is. You know, my Asian brothers and sisters are getting a lot of hate right now. Well, I don't like that. That's not right. It's the same way it ain't right for black people, it ain't right for them either. And quickly, I'll tell you this: my brother and Jamele's brother, Ros' brother, Sekou Smith, God rest his soul, he recently died of COVID. And Atlanta Hawks asked me what they should do, and they were like, "What you said, Ros, check. We'll give a check." I said, "No. Why don't y'all do an internship and get somebody from the HBCU to come in every summer and do an internship with your website, write stories on the summer league team. How expensive is that? Get them real experience." And I said, that's something that's lasting, that's bigger than a check. And I hope that with Sekou's passing, with what the Hawks are starting, that perhaps the Warriors and all 30 teams in the league could bring somebody of color every summer in to get some experience, just writing on their website or doing video or maybe being an assistant coach. Hopefully that, to me, that's bigger than any check, is experience that they could offer.
You know, one of the things that you brought up when you were answering, Marc, was kind of the awkwardness of conversation with people who are not Black, who are not minorities, that may not know how to communicate it or are looking for answers, and in some cases validation. And can you give some tips or strategies for how you try to be inclusive and helpful in mending that, in bringing that bridge together and involving them in the conversation? And this is for everyone. I want to make sure to open up and bring
just
others.
Be transparent about the truth. I'm reading a book right now called These Truths, and I ain't the greatest book reader in the world, but I'm reading this, and the things I'm learning, like, let's not sweep this stuff up under the rug or just act like George Floyd is a passing fad. Let's be honest with what we see and honest with what we can do to change it, and also call people out that are doing wrong.
Yeah. I'll just chime in. I agree totally with Marc, and I think it's important to not come to work on Monday. I decided I wasn't going to do the "I'm all right" speech or make people be comfortable in their skin, but really acknowledge how uncomfortable we've been in places and spaces for years, and why it was important to have that conversation, to take that pause and not give them a pass and say, "I know you're uncomfortable, but that's how we've been feeling for years. And what do we do about it? And how do we create not a moment, but a movement?" And I think that's so important, is to think about, one, you're the voice at the table that they're comfortable with. And so if you create a space for them where they can continue with the same behavior, you're part of the problem. So you have to really have those tough discussions and to have those conversations, even one-on-one, when you see behavior that doesn't align with your vision and values of your organization, or create an unfairness for somebody else, that you have to be willing to go into that space and say, this has to be different, and let me tell you about our real experience. Because I do think so many times we've created a space where people can be comfortable with their biases, and this is not the time for that anymore.
Right. And I'm a huge proponent. Oh, so I'm sorry, Jemele. Go ahead. No. You got it.
Oh, gee. No, I'll just add to what both Byna and Marc have said. And one of the things I had to do is I stopped coddling. I really did, is because what I realized is that, and this is kind of the unfairness of racism in general, is that the people who are most victimized and burdened by racism then become responsible for solving it. And that's not right. And that's the reason why we are stuck in this holding pattern in terms of racism, because everybody is not equally committed to seeing real change in this area. And, there are plenty of books at this point with so much information available to all of us, be it through documentaries, reading, whatever articles. There's so much of a wealth of material. And so rather than give people a pass or an excuse saying, oh, they just don't know better, I just stopped saying that and called it intentional. And people get defensive about it, and they get sometimes upset, and I don't care, because at this point, you don't really have an excuse, because well, part of the problem is that it's always been on us to do something. And it's like, there's no problem that's going to be able to go away if you continue to see race and white supremacy and social injustice as just a Black problem, or just something that is an Asian problem or a Latino problem, or whatever it may be. As long as you continue to put it on these groups, it's going to require more help than that. So my challenge is to those who are in power positions, who have the privilege. My challenge to you is to be intellectually curious about other people in this nation besides yourself. It starts with that, having that curiosity. And then take it a step further, because I tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to sit up here and redo my African American history course for you. Okay? Not going to do that for you. Or my Live Black experience. It's like, nah, that's not going to happen. So it requires effort. It requires you to do something other than just wonder and question. It requires you maybe to have conversations with people about difficult issues. I mean, much like Marc just talked about an experience, like I never had so many white people call me in my life last year that are good friends of mine to talk specifically about race. We've been friends for years. And I was suddenly having those conversations with one white person after another, and I told them all the same thing, and that was, I need you to pick up a book, because I know what I'm not going to do is I'm not walking you through 400 years. So you go, once you read the books you need to read, you come back to me, we can have this conversation. I think part of that is that if you have people of color that you consider to be friends, you need to stop treating their experiences as invisible and have that conversation with them and find out what life is really like for them, and maybe in ways in which unknowingly you have created an atmosphere where they feel like they cannot be their true selves around them. Like for a lot of Black people in particular, the reason we don't have these conversations with white people, with white friends, is not for us, it's for you. We're helping you out. It's not. So I think now you need to ask yourself about those conversations you haven't been having with your Black friends and your Asian friends, particularly now as we see a real rise in anti-Asian violence. Like, have you had a conversation with them about it? And if not, why not? And so there's got to be a level of demand that is put on the dominant group in order for us to make some real inroads.
Kent, did you want to add in?
Oh, well, yeah, I'm a huge proponent in education and the youth. I love, my 5 years in Atlanta, I loved investing in the youth. And I think that's a very, very good place to start. And, teaching the kids, on that history, giving them the real history and letting them walk around with that vigor and that, with their head held high, that, we're still moving the needle. I mean, you think about once this whole movement start, the Black community gains so much confidence,
Right.
as far as who we are and where we come from. So we can instill this kind of, confidence in our youth early on, let them, help carry this torch. I mean, I think it'll do wonders for us down the road.
Absolutely. And that, that education from an early age will help people be better equipped when they're adults, like roaming around in the real world and in workspaces and workplaces where I want to transition to right now. I feel like, when there's like a movement coming over the country, there's these buzzwords, these hot words that you hear over and over and over till you kind of don't even really know what it means anymore. And one that I often hear is taking up space, and black women, as a Black woman, I'm taking up space. And I'd like to use this time for those who may have heard it and don't fully understand what that even encompasses. Byna, Jemele, when you say you want to take up space as a Black woman, what does that mean for you?
Jemele, you want to go?
Sure. For me, though, I think I thought about a phrase that we have heard often about how we need to, hold the door open. Like once we get in the room, we need to hold the door open to get other people in. And then I realized that I was setting goals far too low by saying that. And so now, especially because I have the advantage of having years in this business, having put in my time, having developed certain relationships, now in a position more of ownership, owning more pieces of my talent than I ever have at any point in my career, that I decided that I wasn't just going to hold the door open, that once I got in the room, I got to destroy the room. I got to change the whole room, because that room can't look the same. You know, adding a Black face, adding a Black woman to a room is not as empowering as people think it is. Because if that Black woman that's in that room doesn't feel supported, doesn't feel as if she can voice her opinion, doesn't feel as if, frankly, she can challenge some people in the room, then what's the point of her being in there? So more often than not, once we get in there, we have to change it. So now it is my mission, my responsibility, my welcomed obligation to not just change rooms, but create avenues of ownership for other Black people. We spend a lot of time in our careers doing a lot of work, a lot of very good work for other people, and it prepares us for a moment that we're often too shy to take. And I've said this to many of my friends who are now mid-career journalists, or even a little bit beyond mid-career, is that you've been outperforming contracts, jobs, your whole life. Do you honestly think that if you did things more for yourself or own more of your talent, that you would slight yourself? You're not going to do that. Like, you're going to continue to outperform because that's all you've done your whole career. And so I think it's important that we understand what a very high value commodity that we actually are. And I think once we have that understanding of worth, that's when we can take up and maximize the most space in whatever environment that we are in. And there's also something to be said by really adopting the old adage of, you know, I'm just not asking for permission anymore. You just got to give me some forgiveness. If it goes wrong, it goes wrong. But like, I ain't in a permission anymore. So, you know, no more email James, no more asking. It's like, I just got to do it. And then just realizing that there's a certain amount of power and freedom that comes in that. And that's not something that happens right away. I mean, I want people to be very clear. You know, I'm in year 22, I think, in this business. It has to develop over time. It's not going to be there year 1, year 5, maybe not even year 10. You got to put your equity in. And Byna knows, as somebody who knows more about finance than I do, is that like you put your equity in, because at some point you can pull it out and really construct something that is truly built for you. And that's all. That's what I've been able to do in year 20 through 22 of my career, and it's been a valuable way that I found to take up space.
Oh gosh, I gotta snap that out. You know, I love the answer, Jemele, and it's 2021, and I'm so tired of still having first stories. We're still having our first in the room stories, or only in the room stories. And you know, I really love the answer that the advancement or the freedom might actually come in more equity and ownership and control. And I think that's a perfect segue to Byna Elliott, who again is the JP Morgan Chase head of advancing Black pathways. And as we talk about ownership and equity, you lead a group that works to shrink the racial wealth divide. What does that mean, and how do you do that?
So when you think about all of the stats that we look at for Black and Latinx and other people of color, there's a big difference between how we are moving and closing that gap than our majority. And so what it means is that we have to do something different. What's the definition of insanity? Is doing the same thing over and over again and hoping for a different result. And so when we looked at the significant gaps, whether it was in small business or in home ownership, we knew as a firm, as one of the largest financial institutions in the country, we had a role to play and could make a difference in closing that racial wealth gap if we focused on it, if we had some intentionality. So Advancing Black Pathways, which was launched about 2 years ago. So I'm really proud to say that they launched a program before it got popular last May or in June around this work, and saying that there are clear challenges in terms of equity and building wealth in our country for Black and people of color, and what do we need to do about it. And we knew that for us, it was about focusing on Black people. And that's really bold. If you think about 2 years ago, JP Morgan Chase was willing to say, we're going to center this discussion not on BIPOC, not on Black or people of color, but on Black people. And acknowledge that there is an appreciable gap, and say what is the role that our firm could do to close that gap. And so when we think about it, we focused on really 4 primary areas. One, financial literacy and education, just getting us the tools and the knowledge we need to really manage and understand our finances. Careers and skills. Kent talked about education, so we focused on closing that gap around opportunities for education and then laddering that and connecting that with jobs. So we made the commitment of hiring over 4,000 students in the first 5 years of this commitment from HBCU schools. So that was really important. Secondly, we focused on small business. How do we close that gap both from a technical assistance perspective, but also the capital gap? We know that it's not even. And so how do we close that gap? And those are really the key components of the program itself. And then we fast forward to that moment in May where people were making commitments and really acknowledging where we were at as a country and saying we could do better. And we looked at the body of work that we did and said, we've done a lot, but there's more we can do. And you fast forward that to October, we spent a lot of time between May and October looking at the data, the understanding of what the real issues were. And so we launched the largest commitment of any financial institution so far, but hoping that everybody else joins us. We launched a $30 billion Path Forward commitment focused on Black and Latinx, using those same components. This time we're focusing on affordable housing, both rental and home ownership. One of those stats you know about is that African-American home ownership rates have not changed in the last 40 years. It's still at 40% compared to the majority. So we know that's the opportunity. Small business, workforce development, and access to financial services and the resources that people need to move forward and have progress.
Thank you. Actually, your conversation points here brought up a question from the audience, and it fits right in here, so I'm gonna bring it up. And we absolutely want this to be interactive, so thank you. Robert Sherrard sent in a question about, economic equity, and he said, presumably, we're all in favor of equity. However, what measuring stick do we use to measure equity, and how will we know when we achieve equity? Thank you, Robert, for the question.
Right. So I think one of the things that we have to do is break up the word equality and equity because they're not the same. So when we talk about equity, it's about closing that gap first and acknowledging that we have to do something more for the group that's been underserved or disadvantaged. And so when you think about the stats I just talked about, whether it's 40% home ownership rate against the majority, or even the net worth of Black families of $17,000 versus $177,000 for a white American, those are equity gaps. And so when we know that we close those gaps is when we can look at those numbers and those stats and the performance, and they won't happen, unfortunately, probably will not close that equity gap in my lifetime, only because I'm older. But I'm hoping that at some point that we're not having to make whole first just to get to the starting line. And that's what, to me, equity means. And that's what we have to measure is those data points where we say we've achieved or moved the needle from 40% over the last 40 years, that's our home ownership rate, to 50 or 60, where we're closing that gap. Then we might not need all the tools and resources and additional supports. But until then, not only do we have to create an opportunity for equality, but we also have to give and assist to create equity in the opportunities.
Thank you, Byna. As we're talking about kind of ownership here, we've talked about ownership of our businesses, of our content, of the salary coming in. We talked about ownership of homes and spaces, businesses, communities. And I want to come to you a little bit about the ownership of platform and voice. And I feel like all of this was brewing during a time where there were some critics saying that athletes should shut up and dribble. And literally, Jemele, you're a co-host of a store where you kind of tongue-in-cheek say, call the show, stick to sports, because you're not going to. So I'll start with you, Kent. How is the voice, the platform, maybe even, dare I say, the responsibility of the modern athlete evolving with respect to their ownership of their platform and affecting change in society? How's that been evolving for you guys?
Yeah, it's evolving at an alarming rate. I mean, you look at, my teammate, for example, Steph Curry and the gravity he has, and how he's maximized his platform. LeBron James, another, big time athlete that just, moves the needle. Those guys, their words hold weight, and they're doing a good job of it. But you go back a little bit to like a platform like the NCAA is now starting to allow endorsements and branding, and we getting kids at a younger age that can start branding for themselves and creating opportunities for themselves, and those who are even closer to the environment in which we come from, being able to get eyes down there a little bit sooner. I grew up in Kelford, North Carolina, and I wish I could have got some ESPN cameras down there to kind of see where I come from. But now we'll have kids coming from these rural areas that will be able to show where they come from, and shed a light on what's needed in certain areas. So I think it's moving in the right direction, and it's up to us as the elder statesmen playing in the best league in the world to kind of show these kids how to use that platform and why it's important.
And Marc, piggybacking off of this, what do you think is the responsibility of the media in respect to how they influence equality and also with the coverage that they bring?
Well, I was in the bubble. Bays' team didn't last that long, so I was there a lot longer than him.
It was still 53 days, though.
I was there for 3 months, and so it was like really cool. And Bays knows this. I'm giving him a hard time. Like, please tell me if I'm wrong. Never once in your career did you guys get so many questions about what was going on in the Black community, what was going on with the Black man. And it was like beautiful, even though it took George Floyd for this to happen, or Arbery for it to happen, or Breonna Taylor for this to happen, that they wanted the stories. They wanted to talk about it. They wanted to, hear everything they could. And to the players' credit, they forced us to. Mm-hmm. Like, look, today I'm just going to talk about Breonna Taylor. Or why don't you read what's on my shoes? Or let's talk about what's on the back of my jersey. The feeling I had, I don't know if I could ever feel that again. And to walk on a court and see Black Lives Matter on it, to see a white person wearing a basketball jersey that says Ally on it or Black Lives Matter on it almost brought me to tears. Having difficult discussions, seeing referees even after Jacob Blake, got shot, doing a march around the Disney property. It was a unique experience that I wish Jemele was there. I wish Ros was there. I wish y'all could have found it. It's something that, hopefully will never happen again. But my time there, I'll just always cherish, because it was the most woke sports event that I've ever been to in my life. And I think the players not only use their platform the right way, and Bays, I hope you guys don't lose this. Like, what you guys did after Jacob Blake got shot, the way you guys shut down the NBA for 3 days, the way you collectively came together and refocused into voting and got all the NBA arenas to open up. Don't tell me that didn't influence the election. Don't tell me it didn't influence what happened in Georgia. It did, and I just hope that you guys don't forget. And the Warriors people love me saying this. It's their slogan: strength in numbers. There was strength in numbers, but I oftentimes worry that once you guys have left the bubble, that power, that strength, that wokeness, a lot of it might have been left there. And I just hope you guys don't forget the power that you have, not only to get people to listen to you.
And thank you, Marc. I think for me on my end, it was a little, I'm not sure if we could hear you on the end on that last sentence.
Oh, I just said, just telling Bays, like, I hope you guys never forget, how you guys can change the world and how you can make these billionaires stop, look and listen and move in a way that they never thought they would. And because you guys shut up, made them shut up and listen to you do more than just dribble. So please don't lose that. And I hope you guys don't lose that at all.
Ross, if I can add something to what Marc said, because your question was just about the media's responsibility. And, Marc has been a vigilant, soldier and leader in this area, being deeply involved with the National Association of Black Journalists Sports Task Force. The other thing the media can do is that they need to be accountable for the lack of diversity in the industry. I mean, it's been a long-standing problem throughout my career, Marc's career, your career, Ros. Too many newsrooms, too many media outlets, digital and otherwise, they're too white. And this has greatly influenced and shaped the coverage. Like, part of the reason why Black athletes weren't asked those questions is because there's not enough Marc Spears. That's why, right? And so that right there is what would certainly generate a different type of conversation before an Ahmaud Arbery has to happen or Breonna Taylor has to happen. These are issues that, obviously, as Black journalists, that we're uniquely qualified to discuss, talk about, and put into context. And the other part about it is, even now, in the moment where it's fashionable to discuss these issues, and sadly I have some experience with this, is you gotta have media outlets and media partners that are courageous. That you gotta be built for a certain kind of fight if you want to talk about and discuss racial issues in sports, racial gender issues, period, in sports in particular. And there's a lot of places that frankly aren't that courageous. There's nothing that changed about oppression or police brutality in the last year, nothing at all. The only thing that changed and why certain outlets and even certain leagues, I wouldn't include the NBA necessarily in this group, but the only thing that changed for NFL is that public opinion changed. That was literally it. And so I'm sort of at my peak frustration with a lot of these companies and who are waiting until everybody's on the same page or waiting to be the last ones on the bus before they decide something. I don't judge you by what you do when it's convenient. I judge you by what you do when it's most inconvenient, because that's when it really makes a significant, difference. I mean, had this been the energy when Colin Kaepernick took his protest in 2016, he might still be playing right now. And that's why you can't let those moments go by and wait until it's popular with everybody or it's trendy. Black Lives Matter saying it was like a cuss word 4 years ago. And all it is saying that this needs to matter. And to think that was so offensive to people that they wouldn't dare even say it. And now you got people like Roger Goodell just saying it like he woke up saying it. And so it's just, what I would say is that I think the media's responsibility has always been to be the watchdog. It's one simple phrase that I learned as a young journalist, is that the role of the media is to comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. And unfortunately, we don't do that as consistently and as vigilantly as we should. And therefore, we're always reacting to when bad things happen, as opposed to doing things where we would be ahead of these kind of stories, where we would be courageous enough to talk to somebody like Kip Bazemore about racial issues before Breonna Taylor happened. And so there's got to be some responsibilities on the media's part for, frankly, the institutional racism that has been allowed to exist in the media, and for not being courageous enough to report on these issues before it's a reactionary moment.
But can I just chime in right here and say, Jemele and Marc, thank you all for being unapologetic and being early and really leaning in and putting your own selves on the line in your careers by challenging and speaking your truth before it became popular, because that's how we got to this point, is because people stood up and said, I'm unapologetic and I stand for what I stand for. And because of that, when we had this next moment in May, we were able to have the conversation, not from that point 4 years ago, but from where you could see where your career survived, flourished, and people started to seek your opinion and knew that you were truth tellers beforehand and that you weren't on the bandwagon.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one of the reasons I've always looked up to Jemele, and also doing it when it's not easy. And I can only imagine I mean, we all followed a very public story of the amount of pressure and antagonism. You know, you've gone through, and Marc, you talked about it, and you've been trying to tell these stories since I've had the chance to even know you. And now it's very popular, but I want to thank you guys as well for leading the way in our media community as well. And, you know, Jemele, you said it.
Me and Jemele started hip hop with journalism. Huh? Like me and Jemele was like early on, right?
I was on top of it.
We like the Cool Herc and, you know, Bada, you know, we the pioneers, baby. Not everybody want to remix it.
Right.
You know?
Hey, a flower. We're gonna give you guys your flowers here today. We're gonna give you the flowers that you deserve, rightfully so. And everybody on this panel here, the flowers as well. You know, for Byna Elliott, for Kent Bazemore being here and giving us the insight from their perspectives, whether it's in finance or as an athlete, or for us in media. You know, I've appreciated being a part of this Warriors Black History Month celebration. I was part of it last year for them. This year, I hope to be here next year. And I think that's part of what Jemele said so well, and a great way to end it, where there's got to be consistency to the effort. Like, there's got to be a commitment. There's got to be conviction when you choose to do it. And the word you used was so good, Jemele, courage, when it's not popular, when this isn't the hot, you know, thing to do. And that will kind of come with the authenticity of the effort as well. And we thank you for just everyone who's here to be a part of this, watching A Voice in the Movement, presented by Chase here. I hope you enjoyed the Warriors Black History Month celebration put on by the Warriors Black Alliance Network. And then to Kent, Byna, Marc, Jemele, thank you guys so much for your insights.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Yep. Good night, y'all. I'm Ros Gold-Onwude. Beyond 28. Happy Black History Month. We're going beyond 28.
All right.